The crimson sky of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly above the rocky plateau where Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson sat cross-legged beside what appeared to be nothing more than a standard camping setup. His olive-green tent fluttered gently in the alien breeze while a modest backpack leaned against a folding chair that looked like it belonged at a weekend barbecue rather than on a hostile alien world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 300 meters away, Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet watched through her tactical visor, her elongated fingers drumming against the sleek surface of her plasma rifle. The alien warrior's iridescent blue skin caught the strange light of the binary suns, and her 4 eyes narrowed in what could only be described as amusement. "This is their champion?" she hissed to her lieutenant, Korthek, whose own imposing 7-foot frame cast a shadow over the rocky outcropping where they observed. "Look at him. He's having a picnic." Korthek's mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. "The humans must truly be desperate, Commander. They sent us a camper with a tent and a lunchbox." Marcus seemed completely unaware of his observers as he calmly unpacked what appeared to be a thermos, unscrewing the cap with the unhurried precision of someone settling in for a long afternoon in the wilderness. Steam rose from the container, and he took a measured sip before setting it down on a small collapsible table that had materialized from his pack with surprising efficiency. "Perhaps this is their way of surrendering," Vexthara mused, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had conquered 17 worlds in her military career. "They offer us their weakest member as tribute, hoping we'll take pity on their pathetic species." The Zephyrians had arrived on this neutral world with expectations of facing Earth's finest military minds, the legendary tacticians they'd heard whispered about in the darker corners of the galaxy. Instead, they found a single human who looked more prepared for a weekend camping trip than intergalactic warfare. Marcus finished his drink and stood, stretching his arms above his head with the casual ease of someone working out morning stiffness. He was of average height by human standards, perhaps 5'10", with brown hair that needed a trim and a face that wouldn't stand out in any crowd. His clothing was simple: khaki pants, a faded green t-shirt, and hiking boots that had seen better days. Nothing about him suggested military training, let alone the kind of advanced warfare capabilities that had supposedly allowed humanity to hold its own against superior alien forces across the galaxy. "Should we simply eliminate him now?" Korthek suggested, his massive clawed hand resting on the grip of his energy weapon. "This feels like a waste of our time." Vexthara held up a restraining hand. "No, let's observe. There must be some reason. The humans chose this particular individual. Perhaps they have hidden weapons nearby, or reinforcements waiting in orbit." She activated her long-range scanners, sweeping the area for any signs of advanced technology or concealed military assets. The readings came back exactly as expected. Basic camping equipment, no energy signatures beyond the human's own biological readings, and certainly nothing that could pose a threat to 2 elite Zephyrian warriors equipped with enough firepower to level a small city. Marcus began what appeared to be the process of organizing his campsite. From his backpack, he withdrew item after item that seemed to confirm every assumption about his civilian status. A sleeping bag that he shook out and arranged inside the tent. A small camping stove that he assembled with practiced ease. Packets of what were unmistakably trail mix and dehydrated meals. Even a paperback book that he placed carefully on his collapsible table, its worn cover suggesting frequent reading. "This is insulting," Vexthara growled, her secondary arms flexing in agitation. "The humans mock us by sending their equivalent of a tourist." As if hearing her words across the impossible distance, Marcus looked up from his tasks and appeared to scan the horizon. For just a moment, his gaze seemed to linger in their direction, but then he returned to his activities with the same unhurried calm he'd displayed since his arrival. From his pack came More items that reinforced the camping narrative. A small hatchet for splitting wood, coils of rope, metal stakes for securing his tent, and what appeared to be a basic first aid kit. Each item was placed with deliberate care in its designated spot, creating an organized perimeter around his central camping area that looked like something from an outdoor recreation manual. "Commander," Korthik said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone, "our intelligence reports indicated that this meeting was arranged at the highest levels of both our governments. The humans specifically requested this individual for these negotiations. There must be something we're missing." Vexthara's upper eyes narrowed while her lower ones continued to track Marcus's movements. "You're suggesting this camper is somehow significant?" "I'm suggesting that underestimating humans has historically been unwise." The commander's jaw tightened. It was true that humanity had surprised the galactic community more than once with their tactical innovations and stubborn refusal to follow established patterns of warfare. They'd managed to establish themselves as a legitimate spacefaring civilization, despite lacking the advanced technology that most species required for such expansion. But this man below them showed no signs of the cunning or resourcefulness that had made humans notorious throughout the galaxy. Marcus was now assembling what appeared to be a simple camp chair, following a process that involved unfolding metal legs and attaching a canvas seat. He worked with the methodical patience of someone who had performed this task countless times, his movements economical and precise, but entirely unremarkable. "Perhaps," Vexthara said slowly, "the humans have finally realized their limitations. This could be their way of acknowledging our superiority without the humiliation of formal surrender." She watched as Marcus completed his chair assembly and sat down, pulling the paperback book from his table and opening it to a bookmarked page. The sight of an enemy representative reading fiction while supposedly preparing for crucial interspecies negotiations struck her as so absurd that she had to restrain herself from immediate action. "He's reading," she announced to Korthik, as if stating the observation aloud might make it more comprehensible. "I can see that, Commander. He's reading a book. While we watch him, on a planet where the fate of our species' future relationship hangs in the balance." Marcus turned a page with the same casual attention he might give to leisure reading in his own backyard. The afternoon light was shifting as one of the binary suns moved lower toward the horizon, and he adjusted his position slightly to keep the text illuminated, showing no awareness of her concern for the powerful alien forces observing his every move. From her elevated position, Vexthara could make out additional details of his equipment. The tent was a simple dome design in military green, the kind that could be purchased at any outdoor recreation store. The backpack bore no military markings or technological enhancements, just the worn logo of what appeared to be a civilian manufacturer. Even his clothing suggested nothing more threatening than a weekend hiking enthusiast. "This has to be some kind of psychological warfare," she muttered, her confidence beginning to waver despite herself. "Humans are known for their unconventional tactics." Korthik shifted his considerable weight, causing small rocks to skitter down the slope beneath him. What if it's exactly what it appears to be? What if they simply sent their most expendable representative? The possibility was almost more insulting than any deliberate strategy. To think that humanity considered this camping expedition adequate for negotiations with the Zephyrian Imperial fleet suggested either complete ignorance of their military capabilities or a level of disrespect that demanded immediate and overwhelming response. Marcus closed his book and stood, stretching again before walking to his pack. He withdrew what appeared to be a standard camping lantern, examining it briefly before setting it on his table without activating it. The simple action somehow felt significant, though Vexthara couldn't identify exactly why. The binary suns were continuing their descent toward the rocky horizon, and the alien commander realized that they had been observing this mundane Camping set up for nearly 2 hours without witnessing anything that could remotely be considered threatening or even interesting. Her military training urged immediate action, but some deeper instinct suggested that there was more to this situation than appearances indicated. "Commander," Korthik said quietly, "should we initiate contact?" Vexthara continued watching as Marcus began what appeared to be preparations for an evening meal, assembling his small camping stove with the same methodical precision he'd shown with every other task. The normalcy of it all was becoming almost hypnotic in its mundane predictability. "Not yet," she replied, though her certainty was beginning to crack around the edges. "Let's see what else this camper has in his bag of tricks." As the alien suns cast longer shadows across the plateau, Commander Vexthara made her decision. The extended observation had yielded nothing but mounting frustration, and her warrior instincts demanded action. She gestured to Korthik with a sharp motion of her primary arm. "Enough of this charade. We are approaching now." The two Zephyrians descended from their rocky vantage point with the fluid grace that made their species feared across the galaxy. Their advanced armor systems automatically adjusted to the terrain, servos whirring softly as they navigated the loose scree and jagged outcroppings. Within minutes, they had covered the distance that separated them from Marcus's campsite. Marcus looked up from his camping stove as they approached, showing no visible surprise at the sudden appearance of 7-foot-tall alien warriors bristling with advanced weaponry. Instead, he offered a slight nod of acknowledgement, as if he'd been expecting company for dinner. "Evening," he said, his voice carrying the easy familiarity of someone greeting neighbors at a backyard barbecue. "You folks must be the Zephyrian delegation. I'm Marcus Thompson." Vexthara stopped approximately 10 feet from the edge of his organized campsite, her weapon systems automatically scanning for threats while her secondary vision focused on cataloging every piece of equipment within reach. The readings remained stubbornly consistent with previous observations: camping gear, food supplies, basic survival equipment. Nothing that registered as dangerous by any known technological standard. "I am Commander Vexthara of the Imperial Fleet," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate deference. "We were informed that Earth would send their finest representative for these negotiations. Instead, we find this." She gestured broadly at his campsite with obvious disdain. Marcus followed her motion with his eyes, taking in his own equipment, as if seeing it from her perspective for the first time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I can understand your confusion," he replied, stirring something in a small pot on his camping stove. "Would you like some coffee? I brought extra." Korthik's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or irritation. "The human offers us beverages while we discuss the terms of potential warfare between our species." "Actually," Marcus said, lifting the pot slightly, "it's just instant coffee. Nothing fancy. But it's been a long day, and I find these conversations go better when everyone is comfortable." Vexthara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of profound bewilderment among her people. In her extensive military career, she had negotiated with dozens of species, each following predictable patterns of posturing, threat assessment, and careful diplomatic maneuvering. None had ever offered her refreshments while sitting beside a dome tent. "Human," she said, her voice dropping to a more dangerous register, "do you understand the gravity of this situation? Your species' future relationship with the Zephyrian Empire hangs in the balance. We came here expecting to meet with military strategists, not wilderness enthusiasts." Marcus poured steaming liquid from his pot into a metal camping mug, the familiar domestic action seeming almost surreal against the backdrop of interstellar diplomacy. "I appreciate the seriousness of the situation," he said. "That's exactly why I'm here." "You?" Korthik interjected. "A camper with a tent and a coffee pot?" Well, Marcus said, taking a sip from his mug and considering the question with apparent sincerity, I suppose that's one way to look at it. He set down his coffee and began rummaging through his backpack again, emerging with what appeared to be a standard camping multi-tool. The device looked worn from regular use, its metal surfaces showing the kind of patina that came from years of practical application rather than military precision. The thing about camping gear, Marcus continued, unfolding various implements from the multi-tool with practiced ease, is that it's designed to be simple, reliable, and effective. You don't want complicated technology when you're 50 miles from the nearest civilization. Vexthara watched as he used the tool's knife blade to open a package of what looked like dehydrated soup mix. Every movement was economical and purposeful, but entirely mundane. Her scanning systems continued to register nothing beyond baseline human technology and basic survival equipment. Your point being? She demanded. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective ones, Marcus replied, emptying the soup mix into his pot and stirring it with a spoon that folded out from the multi-tool's handle. Take this little gadget, for example. Knife, scissors, screwdriver, can opener, file, tweezers, toothpick. Nothing sophisticated, but it'll handle 90% of the problems you encounter in the field. Korthik shifted his weight impatiently. Commander, this is clearly some form of primitive delay tactic. Perhaps we should demonstrate the consequences of wasting our time. The lieutenant's massive hand moved toward the grip of his plasma weapon, but Vexthara held up a restraining gesture. Something in Marcus's demeanor was beginning to register, as significant, though she couldn't yet identify what it was. The human showed no reaction to the implied threat, continuing to prepare his simple meal with the same unhurried attention to detail. You mentioned consequences, Marcus said, not looking up from his cooking. That's actually why I requested this meeting location. Neutral ground, away from populated areas, where we can speak freely about what happens next. What happens next, Vexthara said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, depends entirely on your species' willingness to acknowledge Zephyrian superiority and accept our terms for coexistence. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if considering a particularly interesting point in a casual conversation. That's one possible outcome, he agreed. Though I should probably mention that my presence here represents a rather different perspective from Earth's government. He stood and walked to his tent, unzipping the entrance and reaching inside. Both aliens tensed reflexively, their weapon systems engaging preliminary targeting protocols. But Marcus emerged holding only a sleeping bag that he shook out and arranged beside his chair. You see, he continued, settling back into his seat with his soup, there's been some disagreement in our leadership about how to handle first contact with aggressive alien civilizations. Some folks favor the diplomatic approach. Others lean toward immediate military response. And you represent which faction? Vexthara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Neither, actually, Marcus said, blowing on a spoonful of soup to cool it. I represent a third option that most people haven't considered yet. The binary suns were now touching the horizon, painting the rocky landscape in shades of orange and deep red. Marcus reached for his camping lantern and activated it with a simple switch, casting a warm circle of light around his immediate area. The homely glow made the entire scene feel even more disconnected from the reality of interstellar conflict. What third option? Korthik demanded. Marcus finished his soup and set the bowl aside, then leaned back in his chair with his coffee mug cradled in both hands. For the first time since their arrival, his casual demeanor shifted slightly, though the change was so subtle that it might have been a trick of the lantern light. The option where we demonstrate that appearances can be deceiving, he said quietly. Your species has built its reputation on technological superiority and military dominance. You've conquered 17 worlds because your enemies either couldn't match your firepower or couldn't adapt quickly enough to your tactics. Vexthara's secondary arms flexed involuntarily. Your point? My point is that you're operating under certain assumptions about human capabilities based on what you can observe and measure with your instruments. Marcus gestured toward his camping equipment with his mug. Just like you've been making assumptions about this gear for the past few hours. Those aren't assumptions, Korthik protested. Our scanners are the most advanced technology in known space. We can analyze the molecular composition of your equipment from orbit. There's nothing here but primitive camping supplies. Marcus smiled for the first time since their conversation began, and something in that expression made both aliens step back involuntarily. It wasn't a friendly smile, or even a confident one. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting patiently for exactly the right moment to reveal a carefully hidden truth. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say, he replied, setting down his coffee and reaching for his backpack once again. Because now I get to show you why human ingenuity has kept us alive in a galaxy full of species that should have eliminated us years ago. The camping lantern flickers slightly in the growing darkness, and for the first time since landing on this neutral world, Commander Vex Thura felt the first stirring of genuine uncertainty about what she was facing. The morning light of Kepler 442b's binary suns revealed a transformed landscape. Where once there had been a simple camping setup, now stood the remains of what could only be described as a mobile command center. Scattered components of Marcus's camping gear lay partially disassembled around the plateau, each piece revealing levels of technological sophistication that made even Zephyrian military equipment seem primitive by comparison. Commander Vex Thura sat on a boulder 50 meters from Marcus's position, her weapons long since powered down and secured. The events of the previous night had fundamentally altered her understanding not just of human capabilities, but of warfare itself. Beside her, Lieutenant Korthik stared at the deactivated remains of what had appeared to be a simple camping lantern, but had proven capable of generating an electromagnetic pulse that could disable their entire fleet's communications array. How long? Vex Thura asked, her voice carrying none of its earlier authority. How long have your people possessed this level of technology? Marcus was methodically repacking his equipment, each item folding back into its innocuous camping configuration, with the same practiced ease he'd shown during setup. The sleeping bag that had concealed a quantum processing unit, the tent stakes that had served as energy distribution nodes, the coffee thermos that had somehow interfaced with orbital defense platforms. All of it designed to appear completely harmless to even the most advanced scanning technology. That's not really the right question, Marcus replied, carefully coiling what looked like ordinary climbing rope, but had functioned as a sophisticated sensor array. The technology itself isn't what matters, it's the philosophy behind it. He paused in his packing and looked directly at both aliens, his expression serious but no longer carrying the dangerous edge that had emerged during their confrontation. Your species, like most others we've encountered, equates advancement with complexity. Bigger weapons, more obvious displays of power, technology that announces itself. You build ships that look intimidating and carry weapons that are clearly weapons. Korthik's mandibles clicked softly, and humans do not? Humans learned early that survival often depends on being underestimated, Marcus said. We've been the physically weakest species on our own planet for most of our evolutionary history. We survived by being clever, adaptable, and by making. Our enemies think we were less dangerous than we actually were. Vex there stood and walked closer, no longer viewing Marcus as a potential threat, but as something far more complex. So this entire display was meant to demonstrate human deception capabilities? Not deception, Marcus corrected. Misdirection. There's a difference. Everything I showed you was real. The coffee was actually coffee. The tent really did provide shelter. The rope could genuinely be used for climbing. The difference is that each item also served additional functions that your scanning technology couldn't detect because it was looking for threats that matched known patterns. He held up the multi-tool that had so fascinated the aliens earlier. This really is just a camping multi-tool. But the metals it's constructed from include elements that don't exist naturally in this galaxy. The molecular structure creates resonance frequencies that can interfere with most standard shielding systems. It's still a knife, scissors, and screwdriver. It's just also something else entirely. The philosophical implications were staggering. Humanity had achieved technological superiority not through obvious advancement, but through innovative applications of seemingly mundane concepts. They had weaponized the very idea of harmlessness. Your fleet, Vexthara said slowly, the one that brought you here. I assume it's not actually a single transport vessel. Marcus smiled, and this time the expression held genuine warmth rather than hidden threats. 3 cargo containers in orbit, each one appearing to carry standard supplies and equipment. My government felt it was important to have adequate support for camping trips. Cargo containers that could level continents, Korthak observed. If necessary, Marcus agreed. Though I'm hoping that won't be required. The whole point of this demonstration was to show that humanity prefers solutions that don't involve massive destruction. We'd rather change how conflicts are approached entirely. Vexthara processed this information, her strategic mind already recognizing the broader implications. You're proposing an alliance. I'm proposing a new model for interspecies relations, Marcus said. One based on mutual respect rather than dominance hierarchies. Your people have conquered 17 worlds through superior technology and military might. That's impressive, but it's also unsustainable in the long term. He gestured toward the plateau around them, where morning light was revealing the true scope of what his camping setup had accomplished during the night. Sensor readings showed that the entire area had been transformed into a tactical analysis zone, gathering intelligence on Zephyrian technology, communication protocols, and strategic capabilities without firing a single shot or causing any permanent damage. Every conquest creates resistance. Every display of dominance generates enemies who spend their time developing countermeasures. You're trapped in an escalating cycle where you have to keep getting stronger just to maintain what you've already achieved. Korthak shifted uncomfortably. You suggest we abandon our military advantages? I suggest you expand your definition of advantage, Marcus replied. Humans discovered something interesting about cooperation versus domination. When you conquer a species, you gain their resources but lose their innovation. When you partner with them, you gain access to entirely new ways of thinking about problems. He began folding his tent with the same methodical precision, but now the aliens could see the almost organic way the advanced materials responded to his touch. Self-organizing and compact in ways that defied conventional understanding of physics. Take this conversation, for example, Marcus continued. 24 hours ago, you viewed humans as a minor threat to be quickly eliminated or subjugated. Now you're reconsidering fundamental assumptions about technology, strategy, and warfare itself. That's not because I defeated you in combat. It's because I challenged you to think differently. Vexthara found herself nodding despite her instinctive resistance to the concept. You're suggesting that intellectual challenge is more valuable than military conquest. I'm suggesting that the universe is a much more interesting place when you're learning from your neighbors instead of ruling them, Marcus said. Humanity has survived by being adaptable. We've thrived by finding new solutions to old problems. But we can't do that effectively in isolation. The camp was nearly packed now, with only a few items remaining to be stowed. Marcus picked up his coffee thermos and offered it to Vexthara. Want to know the most advanced piece of technology in my entire kit? She accepted the container, her scanning systems immediately attempting to analyze its composition and function. The readings showed standard human metallurgy, basic thermal regulation, nothing that registered as remotely sophisticated. I don't understand, she said. It keeps coffee hot, Marcus explained. Simple, reliable, effective. For the past 3 days, it's given me exactly what I needed, when I needed it, without fail. Sometimes the most advanced solution is the one that simply works. Korthik approached cautiously. You're saying that complexity is not always superiority. I'm saying that the best technology is often invisible, Marcus replied. It integrates so seamlessly with daily life that you forget it's there. It solves problems without creating new ones. It makes life better without making life more complicated. As the last of his equipment disappeared into the deceptively ordinary backpack, Marcus shouldered the load and looked at both aliens with an expression of genuine hope. The question now is whether your people are interested in exploring what cooperation might look like, or whether you prefer the traditional approach of conquest and domination. Vexthera exchanged a long look with Korthik, both of them recognizing that they were facing a decision that would shape the future of their civilization. The human had demonstrated capabilities that made military confrontation potentially catastrophic, but more importantly, he had offered an alternative that neither of them had previously considered. What would this cooperation look like in practical terms? She asked. Marcus began walking toward the extraction point where his transport would arrive, and the aliens fell into step beside him. That's something we'd figure out together. Humans have some interesting ideas about sustainable resource management, conflict resolution, and technological development. Zephyrinus have mastered energy manipulation, material science, and stellar engineering. Imagine what we could accomplish by combining those strengths instead of using them against each other. The binary suns were climbing higher now, painting the landscape in brilliant golds and oranges. In the distance, 3 small shapes were descending from orbit, appearing for all the world like standard cargo transports coming to collect a camper and his gear. Will we see you again? Korthik asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in the question. Marcus smiled. That depends entirely on what message you take back to your leaders. But I hope so. The universe is a big place, and there's room for all of us to grow into something better than what we've been. As the transport touched down and Marcus began walking toward it, Vexthera called after him. How do we know you won't use these capabilities against us if negotiations fail? Marcus paused and turned back, his expression serious but not threatening. Because the goal isn't to defeat you. The goal is to build something that makes defeat irrelevant for everyone involved. The transport lifted off moments later, leaving the 2 Zephyrian warriors alone on the plateau with a fundamentally altered understanding of humanity, technology, and the possibilities that emerged when strength was redefined not as the power to dominate, but as the wisdom to cooperate. In the growing silence, Vexthera realized that she was no longer thinking about conquest. Instead, she was wondering what the future might hold when civilizations chose partnership over conflict, innovation over intimidation, and the quiet confidence of a camping thermos over the obvious threat of a plasma cannon. The ramifications of this encounter would echo far beyond this single meeting. Across the galaxy, established power structures were built on the assumption that technological superiority meant visible superiority. The Zephyrian Empire had risen to prominence precisely because their capabilities were unmistakable, their ships imposing monuments to military engineering that BROADCASD strength across light years of space. But Marcus had introduced a concept that threatened to revolutionize interstellar relations, the idea that true power might be invisible, integrated so seamlessly into everyday existence that it became indistinguishable from mundane utility. This wasn't merely a tactical advantage. It was a complete paradigm shift that called into question every assumption about how advanced civilizations should interact. Korthik was already formulating the questions that would dominate strategic discussions for years to come. If humans could disguise quantum processing units as sleeping bags, what other seemingly innocent technologies were already deployed throughout the galaxy? How many trade goods, diplomatic gifts, or cultural exchanges had been vehicles for intelligence gathering that made traditional espionage obsolete. More troubling still was the realization that Zephyrian scanning technology, the foundation of their military supremacy, had been rendered effectively useless. Their instruments had been designed to detect known threat patterns, to identify weapons that looked like weapons and defenses that announced themselves as defenses. Marcus had demonstrated that human innovation operated outside these established categories entirely. "We need to reconsider everything," Vexthara murmured, her strategic mind already racing through the implications. "Our approach to intelligence gathering, threat assessment, even basic diplomacy. If every human representative might be carrying capabilities we can't detect, it changes the entire balance of power," Korthik agreed. "Not just with humans, but potentially with every species we've encountered. How many civilizations have we underestimated because their technology didn't match our expectations?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to their entire worldview. The Zephyrian Empire had built its expansion strategy on the principle of overwhelming technological superiority, conquering species that couldn't match their obvious advantages. But what if those advantages had been an illusion all along? What if real advancement meant making power invisible rather than demonstrating it? As they stood on the plateau where Marcus had so casually dismantled their assumptions, both warriors began to understand that this encounter represented more than first contact with a new species. It was a fundamental education in alternative approaches to civilization itself. The human model suggested possibilities that neither had considered. Societies where strength derived from adaptability rather than dominance, where security came from being underestimated rather than feared, where progress meant solving problems rather than creating more impressive ways to destroy enemies. Vexthara activated her communication array, preparing to transmit her report to the Imperial fleet. But for the first time in her military career, she found herself uncertain about what message to send. How could she explain that their entire understanding of human capabilities had been wrong? How could she convey that humanity represented not a threat to be eliminated, but a mystery to be understood? "Commander," Korthik said quietly, "what do we tell them?" She looked out across the empty plateau, trying to process the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Somewhere overhead, 3 cargo containers held enough concealed firepower to challenge their entire battle group. Yet the human who controlled them had chosen conversation over conflict, education over elimination. "We tell them the truth," she said finally, "that we've encountered a species that has mastered something we never considered, the art of being powerful without needing to prove it." The binary suns reached their zenith, casting the landscape in brilliant clarity that seemed to illuminate more than just the physical world. For 2 elite warriors of a conquering empire, this moment marked the beginning of questions that would reshape not only their understanding of humanity, but their vision of what civilization could become when strength was redefined and power was measured by wisdom rather than weapons. The revolution Marcus had started with a simple camping trip would ripple outward from this plateau, carrying with it the promise of a galaxy where cooperation might prove more powerful than conquest, and where the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from transforming them into allies. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.